There's a version of you that the modern world does not want you to meet. A version forged in stillness, disciplined in silence, sharpened by duty, not desire. A version the founding fathers would have recognized instantly because they built an entire nation on the idea that a man's strength is measured by the battles he fights within himself. But today, that version is buried, not by war, not by danger, not by tyranny, but by comfort. This is the American philosophy that destroys weakness, the civic discipline that built the men who shaped a republic, and the system, the modern world, quietly hopes you never learn. Imagine a man named Daniel, 32 years old, smart, talented, full of potential that he keeps negotiating with. He wakes up every morning already behind schedule, checks his phone before he lifts his head from the pillow, scrolls past people he envies, scrolls past people he mocks, scrolls past people doing the things he said he would start last month. He tells himself the same promises. I'll start tomorrow. I'll get serious next week. Just one more break, one last reset, and every time he repeats them, they lose a little more meaning. Daniel is not lazy. He is not weak-willed. He is simply living under a philosophy he never chose, the modern philosophy of convenience. A philosophy that tells him discomfort is a mistake, discipline is optional, and duty is old-fashioned, something for history books, not real life. Daniel doesn't know it, but he is living in a world designed to steal his strength. And the founding fathers would have seen it instantly. They understood something Daniel has forgotten. The easiest life creates the weakest man. Not because softness is evil, but because comfort slowly erodes the virtues that make a man capable of protecting anything: his family, his mind, his future, his principles. Daniel's crisis is not personal, it's cultural. It is the same collapse the founding father strategist, the avatar of this channel, has warned about in every era. When a man loses the discipline to govern himself, someone else must govern him. For Daniel, this shows up in small ways. He knows he should go to the gym. He knows he should work on his business. He knows he should study, plan, execute, improve. But every time he tries, he feels resistance, a quiet panic, as if effort itself is something dangerous. Why? Because the modern world has trained him to confuse discomfort with wrongness. This is why he procrastinates. This is why he distracts himself. This is why he can explain his dreams better than he can pursue them. Daniel isn't broken, he's simply untrained. Because the American philosophy that builds strong men, the philosophy this channel is built around, requires something the modern world avoids at all costs: self-governance, the inner republic, the personal constitution, the discipline to build a life worth living. And Daniel is about to learn the truth that built the original Iron Republic. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the strength of your character. Before America was a country, before the Constitution was written, before the founding fathers stood on battlefields or in candlelit halls debating the fate of a continent, there existed a philosophy, not academic, not political, not idealistic. A philosophy closer to a code, a system of personal conduct, a framework built on one idea: a free nation can only be kept by men who are disciplined enough to rule themselves. The founding father strategist, the symbolic guardian of this channel, would call it Republican virtue, the belief that weakness in a man is not a private flaw, but a public danger. Because a man who cannot command his own impulses will eventually accept a world where someone else commands him. This philosophy did not begin in 1776. It is older, rooted in the classical civilizations that inspired the founders: the Roman idea of virtus, strength of character; the Greek concept of arete, excellence as duty; the Enlightenment belief that liberty requires mastery over the self; and the American frontier truth that no one is coming to save you. But the founding fathers forged these ideas into something uniquely their own. They believed that discipline is freedom, duty is power, restraint is strength, and character is destiny. This system was not gentle, not soft, not forgiving. It demanded that a man confront his lowest instincts. It demanded he silence the part of himself that begged for shortcuts. It demanded that he build a life based not on emotion but on principle. To the founding father strategist, the enemy was never chaos, poverty, nor danger. The true enemy was inner decay, the internal erosion that turns potential into regret. This is what Daniel is facing. Not a lack of talent, not a lack of time, not a lack of opportunity. He is facing the decay that comes from a life lived without structure. He is living as a man with no constitution, a man with no laws, no codes, no declared purpose, no internal governance. And without that, the modern world will shape him into exactly what it wants: a passive consumer, a distracted citizen, a man disconnected from the strength he is capable of. But the Founding Father strategist would teach him the first law of the ancient American system: a man who does not rule himself cannot improve himself. This is where Daniel's transformation begins, not with motivation and not with inspiration, but with a confrontation, a rebellion against the part of him that prefers comfort to growth. This rebellion is not a battle. It is not a war. It is not a temporary challenge. It is, as every Founding Father understood, the formation of a republic, the inner republic, the Iron Republic, where the first act of freedom is the destruction of weakness. The ancient American system, this civic discipline forged in the minds of the founders, was not built for comfort. It was built for endurance, because the Founding Father strategist understood something timeless. Weak men create weak nations. Weakness is not an individual failure. It is a societal threat. When Benjamin Franklin wrote, "Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom," he wasn't being poetic. He was warning us. He meant that liberty depends not on laws or leaders or luck, but on the inner strength of ordinary people. A republic is not protected by armies. It is protected by character. This is why the Founding Fathers obsessed over virtue more than they obsessed over victory. Because victory loses meaning when a people become too soft to keep it. Virtue to them was not holiness. It was not piety. It was not moral perfection. It was self-mastery, the ability to restrain your lowest impulses so you can pursue your highest purpose. Self-governance, self-command, self-control. This was the beating heart of the American system. A man who can govern himself cannot easily be corrupted, cannot easily be manipulated, cannot easily be broken. He becomes a citizen capable of building and defending an Iron Republic. That is why this philosophy destroys weakness, because it forces you to confront a truth the modern world avoids. Your freedom depends on your discipline. Your dignity depends on your duty. Your potential depends on your character. Daniel, our modern, overwhelmed, distracted man, is discovering this slowly. Every moment he avoids discomfort, he feels himself shrinking. Every time he gives in to temptation, he feels himself slipping. Every time he negotiates with his goals, he feels himself weakening. He is beginning to realize the real threat in his life is not failure or responsibility or effort. The real threat is neglect, because neglect is how men collapse. Not suddenly, quietly. The Founding Father strategist would call it death by softness, a slow erosion of the inner structure that once held a man upright. But Daniel is about to reach the turning point, the moment the ancient Americans knew well. The moment a man looks at his life and sees the cracks. The moment he realizes that he has become a danger to his own potential. The moment he understands that the greatest battle he will ever fight will be against himself. This realization marks the end of Chapter 2 and the beginning of Chapter 3, the internal war. Every philosophy that has ever shaped warriors, sages, and legends has a chapter about the battle within. For the Spartans, it was the fight against fear. For the samurai, it was the fight against ego. For the Stoics, it was the fight against emotion. For the Native American tribes, it was the fight against desire and distraction. For the early Americans, the Founding Fathers, it was the fight against self-deception. While other cultures trained men for physical combat, the American founders trained men for internal combat, against the temptations that slowly rot character and dismantle freedom. Daniel doesn't know this, but he is walking directly into that battlefield. It begins on a quiet morning. He wakes up, looks at his phone, reaches for it, and stops. It feels small, insignificant, but to him, it feels like the first conscious act he has made in years. He puts the phone down. His mind screams at him, "Just check it once. You need it. What are you doing? This is weird." You always check it. This resistance is not random. This is psychological sabotage, the mind protecting a habit that has mastered him. The Founding Father strategist would explain it simply. The first time you resist an impulse, you meet the enemy that lives inside you. This enemy is not dark or evil. It is ancient and biological. It is the mechanism your brain uses to keep you comfortable, predictable, and safe. And safety, if overfed, destroys greatness. Daniel is now in the internal war, a war fought in micro moments. The moment you want to stay in bed, the moment you want to procrastinate, the moment you want to avoid discomfort, the moment you want to soothe yourself with distraction, the moment you want to remain who you've always been. The Founding Fathers called this enemy the passions. Not passion like enthusiasm, but passions like impulses. The desire to stay weak, the craving to avoid responsibility, the urge to dissolve into comfort. They believed that if a man cannot govern his passions, then he is not fit for liberty, because anything can govern him. Temptation, comfort, fear, laziness, distraction, anything strong enough to speak louder than his purpose. Now Daniel begins to feel the conflict. He wants to improve, but he doesn't want to suffer. He wants to build discipline, but he doesn't want discomfort. He wants a stronger identity, but he doesn't want to kill the weaker one. This contradiction is the battlefield. The ancient American system taught, the birth of the disciplined self requires the death of the comfortable self. Daniel will lose this war if he fights it with motivation. Motivation is emotional, fleeting, undisciplined. It disappears the moment discomfort arrives. The founders understood that the internal war must be fought with principle, structure, and identity. Because when you act from identity, your impulses lose their power. Daniel doesn't know that yet. He is still fighting with willpower, the weakest weapon possible. So the war hits harder. He tries to work on his side project. But the moment the task becomes difficult, his brain begs him to check his phone. He resists. His mind panics. He feels irritated, restless, anxious, as if something dangerous is happening. This is withdrawal, not from a substance, from a lifestyle of escape, avoidance, comfort, distraction. He is feeling the pain of self-reclamation. The Founding Father strategist would describe it like this: a man must endure the storm inside himself before he can command anything outside himself. Daniel is beginning to understand that discipline is not built in grand acts. It is built in microscopic victories. Choosing focus when your instincts demand distraction. Choosing action when your body demands comfort. Choosing duty when your emotions demand ease. These small moments forge something larger, something ancient, something powerful. Something the founders believed was the foundation of a republic: virtue, moral strength in action. Daniel is bruised, but he is not broken, because for the first time, he knows what he is fighting. He knows the enemy is not the world. It is not bad luck. It is not other people. The enemy is the version of himself that prefers comfort over freedom. And this realization sets the stage for the next chapter, the discovery of the one path. There comes a moment in every transformation when a man realizes something devastating. He cannot live two lives at once. He cannot be both disciplined and endlessly comfortable. He cannot be both principled and impulsive. He cannot be both committed and easily swayed. He cannot be both who he is and who he is meant to become. At some point, a man must choose one path, the path that defines his identity. Daniel doesn't want this truth. Not yet. He wants a compromise, a balance, a softer version of discipline that doesn't demand sacrifice. But the Founding Father strategist, the symbolic voice of early American civic discipline, understood a truth Daniel is only now realizing. A man who tries to keep both sides of himself loses both. In the ancient American worldview, freedom wasn't a reward. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't something granted by rulers. It was the natural byproduct of a disciplined inner life. Freedom emerges from structure. Strength emerges from hardship. Identity emerges from consistency. And so the one path of the American founders was simple, but uncompromising. Choose the identity you want, and kill every behavior that contradicts it. Not cut back, not reduce, not balance, kill. This is the part modern men dislike, which is why modern men remain trapped. Daniel wants change, but he also wants all his old comforts. He wants to be productive, but also endlessly stimulated. He wants to be focused, but also constantly entertained. He wants to be proud of himself without doing the painful work that makes self-respect possible. But philosophy is indifferent to his wants. The Founding Father strategist would call Daniel's mindset republic without virtue. A nation without discipline collapses. A man without discipline collapses faster. So when Daniel sits down to rebuild his life, he confronts a principle that feels unbearably heavy. In a republic and in a man, order must come from within or not at all. No app can save him. No motivation hack can fix him. No routine can force change unless it emerges from identity. So Daniel does something new. He picks up a notebook, and for the first time in his life, he writes down a sentence that terrifies him. I will become a man worthy of my own respect. Then comes the second sentence. To become that man, I must do what he would do and stop doing what he would refuse. The one path is not complicated. It is not easy. It is not stylish. It demands cutting addictions, killing distractions, breaking with comfort, honoring duty over mood, acting according to principle, not impulses, choosing the harder road when it shapes a stronger identity. The founders didn't believe in balance. They believed in devotion. Devotion to principle, devotion to virtue, devotion to the identity they wanted to embody. Daniel now sees why he has failed for years. He wasn't on a path. He was wandering. The one path gives him something sacred, a direction. But direction means nothing without consistency, which leads us directly into the next demand of the ancient American philosophy: practice without gaps. In every powerful philosophical tradition, there is a rule that separates the weak, wandering man from the disciplined, forged man. The rule is simple: gaps kill transformation. The samurai called it breaking the rhythm. The Stoics called it losing command. The Spartans called it fracturing the line. And the founding fathers, masters of civic discipline, called it something colder: a breach. To them, a breach in character was more dangerous than a breach in a fortress wall. Because once a man betrays his own values once, he becomes someone capable of betraying them again. This is what Daniel must confront. He wants consistency, but he doesn't want discomfort. He wants transformation, but he wants breaks. He wants discipline, but he wants exceptions. The founding fathers had a phrase for this: the man of exception becomes the man of excuse. Daniel feels this. He wakes up early one morning, committed to his new path, and then temptation creeps in. You worked hard yesterday, you can rest today. You deserve a break. You're tired. You're not in the mood. You can start later. You can skip this part. And then comes the most dangerous voice. Just this once. Every man knows this voice. This is the voice that has destroyed more potential than failure ever could. Daniel stands at a mirror. His reflection looks the same, but he knows that whoever he chooses now will determine the rest of his life. Why? Because identity is shaped not by the actions you do sometimes, but the actions you refuse to break. The founding father strategist would explain the rule like this: a man becomes free only when his principles are non-negotiable. So Daniel does something radical. He takes his new identity and he applies the only system the founders trusted: the rule of no gaps, no skip days, no exceptions, no negotiations. Even if the work is small, even if the action is brief, the existence of the practice matters more than the size of it. This matches modern psychology. When you repeat a behavior daily, even briefly, you strengthen the neural pathway that defines that identity. Gaps weaken the pathway, and the old identity regains power. This is why you can work out for 90 minutes but skip the next 2 days, and nothing changes. But if you work out for 10 minutes every day without fail, your identity rewrites itself. This is the secret. This is the system. This is the backbone of American civic virtue. Daily discipline routine above mood action, above emotion, identity above convenience. Daniel embraces this. He wakes up and takes action even on days he feels hollow. He focuses even when his mind begs for escape. He honors the practice even when the world around him is loud, chaotic, and tempting. He is not perfect, but he is consistent. And consistency without gaps is the most powerful form of self-respect. For the first time in his life, Daniel senses something changing. His impulses are quietening. His distractions have lost their grip. His comfort cravings have weakened. His mind feels clearer. His decisions feel cleaner. His day feels structured. His identity feels stronger. He is beginning to feel what the Founding Fathers felt was the birthright of every man who lived with discipline, inner sovereignty. He is becoming someone who belongs to himself. And now the stage is set for the final chapters, pre-solutions and the transformation. Before the Founding Fathers ever set pen to parchment, before a single shot was fired at Lexington, there was something deeper happening, something far more important than strategy, weapons, or speeches. They pre-decided the kind of men they would be long before the test arrived. This is the part modern men don't understand. The average man today prepares for a challenge after the challenge hits him. He waits until the breakup. He waits until the debt. He waits until the humiliation. He waits until the weakness has already consumed him. But the men who shaped republics, ancient and American alike, understood a different law. A man who decides in the moment, decides too late. Let's apply this to the viewer's life. You don't prepare for temptation when you're already tempted. You don't prepare for discipline when you're already tired. You don't prepare for courage when the danger is staring you in the face. Identity must be forged before the moment of pressure. The American Republican mindset believed that a free man was not someone who did whatever he wanted. He was someone who had already bound himself to a code he would not violate under pressure. That was the essence of the oath. Not the ceremony, not the signatures, not the rituals, the identity. When a man pre-decides, he becomes unshakable because the decision is no longer emotional. It is constitutional, just like the Republic itself. And this is where behavioral psychology and ancient philosophy become one. Modern research shows that the strongest predictor of willpower success is not motivation. It's not energy. It's not talent. It's pre-commitment. People who decide their rules in advance and eliminate negotiation outperform everyone else. Ancient American Republican virtue was built on this. A man should not debate with his weaker self. That is a battle that must be won long before the enemy arrives. So here's the modern lesson. Your weakness does not defeat you at the moment of temptation. It defeats you the night before, when you fail to decide who you will be tomorrow. This is why weak men keep failing. They keep walking into the battlefield with no orders. But strong men, disciplined men, walk into the day carrying a constitution written in their own mind. Now we arrive at the final stage of this philosophy, the moment where a man either becomes steel or collapses back into the mud. Every transformation begins with a funeral, the death of the old self. The Founding Father strategist, the avatar behind this channel, would say it this way: a republic cannot survive if its men remain who they were. Self-government begins with self-execution. You must kill the version of you that negotiates, that hesitates, that bargains with comfort, that keeps trying to find a softer path. Because this philosophy, the one that built both ancient republics and early America, does not offer comfort, it offers weight. And the weight is the point. Weakness grows in the absence of burden. Strength grows only under pressure. So, what does the transformation actually look like? It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It's not loud or heroic or triumphant. It happens in the smallest moments. When you want to stay in bed, and you rise. When you want to scroll, and you stop. When you want to quit, and you don't. When you want to speak weakness, but you choose silence. When you want to blame, but you take responsibility. These tiny decisions form the steel of a man. Because discipline is not made in the great battles of life, it is made in the inches. American Republican virtue believed that a man's freedom was not measured by how loudly he spoke, but by how silently he conquered himself. So here is the transformation. A man stops seeing discipline as punishment and starts seeing it as dignity. He stops seeing effort as suffering and starts seeing it as sovereignty. He stops seeing hardship as cruelty and starts seeing it as the weight that makes him unbreakable. He stops seeing himself as a victim of the world and starts becoming a governor of his inner republic. Weakness has no place in this worldview, not because weakness is shameful, but because weakness is expensive. A weak man pays for his softness every day, in regret, in lost time, in wasted potential, in the slow corrosion of his own spirit. But a disciplined man, a man living under the philosophy of the Iron Republic, pays a different price. A price of effort, a price of discomfort, a price of commitment, a price of internal order. It is not an easy life, but it is a life that produces something the modern world desperately lacks: self-respect. That is the real reward. Not success, not money, not admiration, not glory, self-respect. Because once a man respects himself deeply, quietly, the world loses its power over him. Fear loses its power, temptation loses its power, opinion loses its power. That is true freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to become exactly who you are capable of being. This is the end point of the transformation. You become a citizen of your own inner republic, a man governed by principle, directed by discipline, strengthened by burden, and sharpened by responsibility. You do not live like the world around you. You do not follow their philosophy. You do not obey their addictions. You do not kneel to their weaknesses. You become something rare. A free man in a world full of slaves to their impulses. That is the American philosophy that destroys weakness, not through violence, not through brutality, not through ego, but through the ruthless honesty of self-government. And when a man truly embodies that, when he becomes sovereign over his own mind, the world cannot break him. Because the world did not build him, he built himself. If this philosophy resonates with you, if you feel the weight, the discipline, the clarity calling you forward, then join us. Subscribe for more lessons from the Founding Father strategist and walk the path of the Iron Republic, where men reclaim discipline, rebuild identity, and forge a life worthy of their own respect.